veneration, while, if it were otherwise, they increased their slaughter in order eventually to win the favor of their said imaginary patron. With the same aim, these favorites of yours of that period even divided the beings of all other forms into clean and unclean. Unclean they called those forms of beings the destruction of whose existence was presumably not pleasing to their gods, and clean those beings the destruction of whose existence was presumably extremely agreeable to those various imaginary idols whom they revered. These sacrificial offerings were made not only in their own house by private beings, but were also made by whole groups and sometimes even in public. There even then existed special places for slaughterings of this kind, which were situated mostly near buildings in memory of something or somebody, chiefly of saints. Of course, of the saints they themselves had elevated to sainthood. Several such special places where the destruction of the beings of different exterior form was carried out then existed in the country of Tikliamish, and among them was one most celebrated, situated on a small mountain, from whence a certain thaumaturgist Aliman was supposed once upon a time to have been taken alive up to some heaven or other. In that place, as well as in other similar places, especially at definite times of the year, they destroyed an innumerable number of beings called oxen, sheep, doves, and so on, and even beings similar to them themselves. In the latter case, the strong usually brought the less strong to be sacrificed, as for instance, a father brought his son, a husband his wife, an elder brother his younger brother, and so on. But for the most part, sacrifices were offered up of slaves, who then, as now, were usually what are called captives, that is to say, beings of a conquered community, which according to the law of what is called soliunensius, had at the given period, that is, at the period when their needful tendency to reciprocal destruction was more intensely manifested to their presences, a lesser significance in respect of this chief peculiarity of theirs. The custom of pleasing their gods by destroying the existence of other beings is followed there on your planet until now, only not on the scale on which these abominations were practiced by your favorites at that time on the continent Ashark. Well then, my boy, during the early days of my sojourn in the town Korkalai, I often talked on various subjects with this mentioned friend of mine, the priest Abdil. But of course I never spoke with him about such questions as might reveal my real nature. Like almost all the three-brained beings of your planet whom I met during all my descents, he also took me for a being of his own planet, but considered me very learned and an authority on the psyche of beings similar to himself. From earliest meetings, whenever we chanced to speak about other beings similar to himself, his responsiveness and experiencings about them always touched me deeply. And when my reason made it quite clear to me that the function of conscience, fundamental for three-brained beings, which had been transmitted to his presence by heredity, had not yet become quite atrophied in him, then there gradually began from that moment to arise in my presence, and as a result to be crystallized, a really functioning needful striving towards him as towards a kinsman of my own nature. Thereafter, he also, according to cosmic law, every cause gives birth to its corresponding result, of course began to have towards me, silnuye Gurdjieff, or as your favorites would say there, a feeling of trusting another like yourself. Well then, my boy, no sooner was this clearly constated in my reason than the idea occurred to me to actualize through this first terrestrial friend of mine the task for which this second descent of mine in person had been made. I therefore intentionally began to lead all our conversation toward the question of the custom of sacrificial offerings. Although, my boy, considerable time has flowed since I talked with that terrestrial friend of mine, I could perhaps now recall word for word and repeat one of our talks we had at that time. I wish to recall and repeat just that talk of ours which was the last, and which serves as the starting point of all the subsequent events, which, though they brought the planetary existence of this terrestrial friend of mine to a painful end, brought him nevertheless to the beginning of the possibility of continuing the task of self-perfecting. This last talk took place in his house. I then explained to him frankly the utter stupidity and absurdity of this custom of sacrificial offerings. I said to him as follows: "Good. You have a religion, a faith in something. It is excellent to have faith in something, in whatever it might be, even if you don't exactly know in whom or in what, nor can represent to yourself the significance and the possibilities of what you have faith in. To have faith, whether consciously or even quite unconsciously, is for every being very necessary and desirable. And it is desirable because, owing to faith alone, does there appear in a being the intensity of being self-consciousness necessary for every being, and also the valuation of personal being as a particle of everything existing in the universe. But what has the existence of another being, which you destroy, to do with this? And moreover, one whose existence you destroy in the name of its creator. Is not that life just the same as yours for the Creator, who created you as well as this other being? Thanks to your psychic strength and cunning, that is to say, to those data proper to you with which our same common Creator has endowed you for the perfecting of your reason, you profit by the psychic weakness of other beings and destroy their existence. Do you understand, you unfortunate creature, what, in an objective sense, and indeed evil deed you commit by this? Firstly, by destroying the existence of other beings, you reduce for yourself the number of factors of that totality of results which alone can form the requisite conditions for the power of self-perfecting of beings similar to yourself. And secondly, you thereby definitely diminish or completely destroy the hopes of our common Father Creator in those possibilities which have been put into you as a three-brained being, and upon whom He counts as a help for Him later. The obvious absurdity of such a terrible being action is already clearly shown by your imagining that by destroying the existence of other beings, you do something pleasing just to that one who has intentionally created those beings also. Can it be that the thought has never even entered your head that if our common Father Creator has created that same life also, then He probably did so for some definite purpose? Think, I told him further. Think a little, not as you have been accustomed to think during the whole of your